Welcome, good evening to all listeners, viewers. Welcome to the Minority Report. We're here yet another week. I am Marlon David, and I will continue to be your host on this program as we explore the issues, raise awareness and advocacy, and discover new topics. This evening we have a packed and very moving program for us as we look forward to a number of issues, and we're going to be hearing from industry standard professionals on some topics. However, before we get into that, I want to share our contact information. You can view this program on the Tobago Updates YouTube channel, the Tobago Updates Facebook page. You can add comments to the website, and you can send your questions to the WhatsApp number that is 284-6597, 284-6597. As we get into our program this evening, I want to, before we actually say anything in the serious realm, I want to send big congratulations to our national football team on their win against St. Vincent and the Grenadines. A 4-1 victory. I mean, we really see the momentum of the team building, and we trust that this momentum will continue under the stewardship of Coach Angus Eve. More so, and this one is right home to us, I want to give a real high note of praise and congratulations to our Costara resident, Ornella Walker. She's the lone Tobagonian on the national swim team, a contingent of 33 who participated at the Pan American Swim Championships that was held in Couva. And I mean, Walker walked away with 5 medals. That is a major, major achievement. 5 medals, 3 gold and 2 silver. In the process, she actually broke the national record for the 100-meter backstroke. And I mean, this is something that, this is a son of the soil, or a daughter of the soil, as it were. She's the lone Tobagonian on that team. So we really want to congratulate her, and we want to say to her, keep up the good work. This is coming from the Minority Council and so on. Keep up the good work and encourage others to get into it. As we see, you don't have to be many, you just have to be effective. So this evening, as we get into our program, we're going to be discussing some issues. We're going to be looking at our social situation. We're going to be looking at some impacts that we've seen coming out of the last 2.5 years with respect to the COVID and so forth. And as we go forward, we're going to have the Minority Councillor joining us later in the program to bring some relevant information. So we're going to go to a break right now, and as we come back, we'll be speaking with a special guest who is going to share some stuff with us this evening. So as we leave, stay locked on, stay logged on, and share the live. We'll be right back.
The Street 919 FM and the Tobago Updates presents the Tobago Updates Morning Show live simulcast on the Street 919 FM. Start your day with all the information you want and need with the simulcast of the Tobago Updates Morning Show live Mondays to Fridays from 7 a.m. on the Street 919 FM, the official station that defends the nation.
I'm Patricia Nicholson-Richards to our
Welcome
top
to Tobago
story.
Update Sports. I'm your boy Marcus Daniel. Thank you.
Trinidad and looms as
remains when
the public is
nobody lives here. Oil and gas exploration continues to affect the livelihood.
Spearside's marine
in
industry.
Tobago fishermen.
When will the
Sion
Roxborough
Francis
Hospital be fully functional?
Of the 5 a.m. to 12 p.m. window
Still
at the
find
island.
treasures like the Golden
continue to
Waterfall.
rise in Tobago.
Morning, morning, good morning, morning. Put a smile on
back this evening. Thank you for those who are logged on, and let me encourage us to get onto Tobago Updates website. Let's get onto Tobago Updates Facebook page so that we can view this evening's program. This evening I have in studio with me a very special guest. Many of us know her, we're familiar with her. It's a household name now in Tobago. I want to welcome to the program Ms. Onika Mars, the president and founder of Woman of Substance. And there is quite a lot taking place in her space right now. And Onika, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Marlon. Good night, everyone.
This is, I mean, I want to try to get as much out of you this evening as we can. We want to begin to look at the social issues that we've been seeing plaguing, and I use that term specifically, plaguing our society today. I know that you are very passionate about abuse and that type of thing. And so I saw it fit, and we thought that who best to bring into this space to begin to provide a certain level of awareness to the public as to what is actually happening, some of the issues that we've seen taking place, and specifically in the area in your field, domestic violence. So I want you to give us an appreciation of what is domestic violence in the first place, and how have we seen this becoming rampant in our society.
Okay, thank you so very much, Marlon. Domestic violence is typically violent or aggressive behavior in a home space against another. Intimate partner violence, which is a subset of domestic violence, gender-based violence, is typically aggressive behavior or violent behavior in an intimate setting between spouses or partners, right? Relationships. A lot of time people talk about domestic violence and they specifically refer to relationships, right? But intimate partner violence, which is a subset as I mentioned before, speaks directly to the spousal intimate relationships. And the second part of that question was, remind me.
The second part, we've been seeing now, having understood the definition, we've been seeing growing instances in this space now in terms of abuse and so on. And you introduced me to a new term there. I didn't realize that there was a subset of domestic violence. So we've been seeing these growing instances. What contributes, or what in your opinion has been contributing to this? And I know you can speak from the experience of the organization or the NGO that you lead. Tell us a bit of what you think is contributing to this rise.
There are a lot of contributory factors. One being we are in a pandemic. We've seen a rise in domestic violence related incidents. As a matter of fact, in 2020 there were 556 cases according to the Central Statistic Office of under the TTPS, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Those were reported cases, and what I want persons to bear in mind is that we may have triple or more amount of unreported cases because there are several reasons why persons do not report DV incidents. During the period of January to March 2021, there were 826 reported cases of domestic violence.
Wow.
Right? So then in 2020, we saw 556.
For the entire year?
For the, it was, yes, 2020, 556. No, sorry, for the period, the same period.
Okay.
Yeah? During the period January to March 2021, we had 826. Right, and it is a steep rise, and we're looking at contributory factors during the pandemic. We had a lockdown. We had persons losing their jobs. One of the major factors is the fact that a lot of perpetrators were in spaces with their partners for extended periods, right? The fact that during the lockdown, they could not have left home to go to the bar or go play a sport or even go to work, it means that persons would have been clashing heads, seeing each other in their space all day, all night. Yeah, and that would have been something that would not have been normal. So during the pandemic, we saw a rise because there were lots of frustration due to the fact that persons lost their jobs, and of course they were challenged with, how do I support my family? I no longer have a job. It is frustrating. As a man, we know that a man's job is to provide for his household. And if a man cannot provide for his household, he feels emasculated. He feels as though he's an infidel. Yeah? So we have a lot of issues, insecurities, lack of trust that contribute to domestic violence and abuse and the rise. I remember early at the onset of the pandemic, we were talking about the fact that, you know, during the lockdown, perpetrators were not able to go out. Now they use, a lot of perpetrators use the bar and sports as a means of escape, right? Some of them may have been frustrated because in domestic violence cases, there's in a lot of them, there's infidelity, right? So the fact that you're locked up inside with your one partner, you cannot go to visit the outside partner. So it brings a level of frustration. Yeah, so we've seen we've seen that increase over that period.
You made mention to something then, and it's a very, very salient point. You identified two periods at the beginning of the COVID experience that we've seen, and you made specific reference to the lockdown and the restrictions and so on. So based on the information, we're seeing that there's direct link, because with the COVID and the restrictions, we now had persons huddled together in same spaces and so on. Now, you touched on some of the issues in terms of what would cause it. In terms of persons, and I know you deal with hundreds of persons, and I'm saying persons because not only women are victims of domestic abuse, but in terms of persons coming to you and so on, how has that experience been? And we're looking at Tobago. This is something that we know is plaguing not just Tobago or Trinidad and Tobago, but the region. And it's a global issue. So the spill-off effects or the spin-off effects are not generic to us. How do you now treat with it in terms of when someone comes? What do you look for to identify that this person is genuinely a case with respect to abuse?
Okay, so then we treat all cases as genuine cases, because before a person come to us, they call and they share their experiences. So I will not judge someone or not believe what they say. Yeah, I wouldn't think that a person would just call women of substance and indicate that they are being abused when they are not. Yeah, I've never had an instance where someone came in and they faked being abused. I've never experienced that.
So we genuinely have a number of these issues, and those statistics speak volume.
And the statistics are not based on Tobago reports only. Yeah,
it's generalized.
It's generalized. And in the Tobago space, we have a lot of incidents of domestic violence and abuse. And because the space is so small, and domestic violence and abuse and intimate partner violence is still seen as something that is, you know, there's still a stigma attached. Yeah, so persons still feel ashamed.
Oh.
I have persons saying, Miss Mars, I don't want anybody to know because people see me on the road or people see me at work and I am well put together. So I don't want anybody to know that I am experiencing intimate partner violence. And there's also that shame attached to intimate partner violence. The thing about it is, like COVID-19, domestic violence and abuse is no respecter of persons. So it doesn't matter what your educational background is. It doesn't matter what your social status is. It doesn't matter what your ethnic background is. It just doesn't matter. It affects everybody across the scale. Okay, yeah. So and this is an issue we face. So I mean, we've had a lot of persons coming out and sharing with us their experiences in Tobago, and I could safely say that because I remember 5 years ago when I started this movement, initially persons were saying, Unika, in that Tobago space, you taking up that responsibility. People wouldn't say what they're going through. People wouldn't share, you know, and I said, you know what, God has called me into this ministry. He has mandated me to act. So act, I will act. Yeah?
True.
So I shared my story and then persons started reaching out. One of the things I heard a lot was, Unika, you do not even look like you experience domestic violence and abuse. And my question is, what does domestic violence and abuse look like?
Yeah.
You know? How does someone how does a victim look?
Exactly.
A victim could be a doctor, a lawyer, and a housekeeper. Anybody could be a victim.
A lot of information coming here to the fore, widening even my understanding of it. This evening we're here on the Minority Report, and we're going to go to a break, and as we get back from the break, we're going to be joined by another guest to accompany Ms. Mars in the conversation as we go forward. So stay locked on, and share the live,
The Street 919 FM and the Tobago Updates presents the Tobago Updates Morning Show live simulcast on the Street 919 FM. Start your day with all the information you want and need with the simulcast of the Tobago Updates Morning Show live Mondays to Fridays from 7 a.m. on the Street 919 FM, the official station that defends the nation.
I'm Patricia Nicholson Richards to
Welcome
our top
to Tobago
story.
Update Sports. I'm your boy Marcus Daniel. Thank you.
Trinidad and looms as
remains when
The public is making...
nobody lives here. Oil and gas exploration continues to affect the livelihood.
Spearsides Marine
in Tobago fishermen.
When will the
Sion
Roxborough
Francis
Hospital be fully functional?
of the 5 a.m. to 12 p.m. window
still find
at the island.
treasures like the Golden
continue to
Waterfall.
rise in Tobago.
Morning, good morning, put a smile on your...
The The Street 919 FM and the Tobago Updates presents the Tobago Updates Morning Show live simulcast on the Street 919 FM. Start your day with all the information you want and need with the simulcast of the Tobago Updates Morning Show live Mondays to Fridays from 7 a.m. on the Street 919 FM, the official station that defends the nation.
Good evening, and we're back with the Minority Report this evening. And as we continue the discussion, I want to introduce to our team this evening Mr. Sule Joseph. He's the counseling psychologist specializing in child and family therapy. And he's also the lead in Sule Joseph and Associates. Mr. Joseph, welcome to the Minority Report.
Thank you for having me, Marilyn. Thank you very much.
Nicely.
I feel as though I could tell my parents I made it in life. I made it. I've done well.
Nice to have you. We're sitting here chatting with Miss Onika Maz, president and founder of the Woman of Substance NGO. And we've been having a real intense discussion. And we want to carry this discussion a bit further. We've been looking at the impact that COVID has had even on the social issues that we see. And we want to get a bit into the psychosocial impact of abuse that we've seen, the increases in over the last 2 years. I know that you deal a lot with families and children and so on. Tell us your experience with respect to the abuses and the increases that we've seen, and what do you attribute it to?
Well, before we get into that, a couple of things. First, let me say good night to Onika. Good night. Well, you clearly have me beat for the dress code. You look quite lovely. I'm underdressed. So thank you for having me again. I would like to first put this into perspective. If we have any conversation about child abuse, we first have to understand and be on the same page as what we mean when we talk about child abuse. And so a very loose, just a definition, a running definition that we'll move with tonight would be that child abuse is the extreme mistreatment or molestation of a child. Very simple definition is the child abuse is the extreme mistreatment or the molestation of a child. Now, bearing that into consideration, a lot of the things that Onika would have mentioned in terms of domestic partner violence, those were some of the same environments that have born the perfect storm to create situations where children can be mistreated severely or molested where the case might be. All right? And of course, they would have reasons for that. Increased parental pressure, lack of income, and so on. Again, things that Onika would have mentioned previously. And of course, one of the things that we ignore a lot when we talk about the lack of income and the stressors and so on, but we don't always talk about the lack of the parenting skills. It's easy to have a child. It's not easy to be a parent. And nobody teaches us. We don't get a book. You don't get a book telling you how to parent a child, how to discipline your child. You don't get a book doing that. So you have to understand that you're talking about an increased pressured situation where parents have been placed consistently with their children, where they may be thinking when they send the children to school that they're good boys and girls, and when they have them at home having to deal with the misbehavior and so on, and the teenage maybe behaviors and so on, and they don't know how to deal with that, right? And they then resort to behaviors that now may be considered abusive behaviors. There are some something that we have to consider.
I just wanted to pull on something you spoke to. You said that the parents are now called upon to parent because, and again I'm taking it based on the last 2 years, we've seen a number of the lockdown restrictions, so parents were now forced to be in the same space, and there were a number of complaints I would have heard, parents complaining about food and you have to buy more groceries now because remember you would have had school feeding and these things, and it definitely increased the pressures on parents. But there's something you and I were discussing, and I really want you to bring some context to that. We've seen an increase as well in terms of teenage pregnancies, and persons don't realize that even that came out of, in many instances, as a result of abuses and that kind of thing. Share your thoughts on it with us.
Well, while we have been focusing on a lot of, and rightfully so, on some of the mainstay abuses that we usually, the sexual abuse, the financial abuse, the physical abuse, a lot of these things stem out of something else that could be considered abusive, which is either isolation or lack of proper supervision. And one of the things that I've noticed is that more than anything else, I think the isolation and the lack of supervision has been very traumatic to children during this period. And when I talk about lack of proper supervision, I'm talking about here, there may be instances where children are being supervised by the abuser, whether it be sexually, emotionally, physically, but lack of proper supervision. This has also, of course, allowed for children who can't go anywhere, increased social media usage. So if you have a little boyfriend as a girl, or you have a little girlfriend as a guy, and of course your hormones raging at this time, during the lockdown, you may go by your girlfriend or your boyfriend, your parents out looking to make ends meet, to pay the bills. And what we've had is what I consider to be a quiet pandemic of teenage pregnancies. We've had a lot of young girls now being pregnant and so on. And that's occurring during this pandemic period, during the lockdown.
Wow.
There were young ladies who would have spoken to me and shared that they couldn't take how packed their household was. And because of that, they instead chose to go and stay by a relative or by a boyfriend. Or by a boyfriend's family and so on. And they couldn't take all of their family members being packed or crammed into their household 24/7 for this entire 2-year period. It became very stressful and frustrating for them. So I do think that's something that we have to give some thought to and some consideration. We definitely need to look, as I had mentioned previously, about helping parents to parent children. One of the things, I'm not certain if it's an issue that is pervasive in Tobago, but I know in Trinidad it's an issue where we have, quote unquote, children making children. And it may not be children chronologically in age. It may not be children chronologically in age, but definitely a child in mindset. So we have these adult baby males who are adult in age, but definitely not adult in mindset. Wow. And we have these young ladies who are young ladies in age, maybe, but definitely not a woman in mindset. And so we have these children who are now making children.
A number of important issues there, so I want to ask Anika to weigh in on this part of the conversation, because we're seeing this going out now into a different direction. Information that may be new to many of us with respect to the increases that of the different abuses that have been occurring over this 2-year period. Onika, I know a lot of persons come out of relationships and come out of situations and go into single parenthood. And I think that is one of the reasons that can contribute to this type of issue that we see even in teenagers, when there's only one parent that's supervising and that one parent still has to work. So there's lack of supervision in the home, ends can't meet. Weigh in on this and share some of your experience with it before we start to tie this part of the program together.
And thank you, Marlon. This is where co-parenting could come in, and persons understanding the importance of co-parenting and not holding one parent hostage because there's no longer that relationship. Yeah, we have in a number of situations where if the mother and the father breaks up, the mother decides that, okay, we broke up because of violence or whatever other issue, the relationship no longer exists. The man may still come around and he may want sex. The woman decides that I cannot have sex with you. And the man says, okay, no sex, no money for the children. This creates, you know, a further burden on the mother who is a single parent, right? I want to mention that we do not only have women who are single parents. We have men also who are single parents. Yeah? So I think it's important for us to continue with the education and awareness drive and do it 24/7, 365. On the television, on the radio, let us have these conversations. Keep the conversations going. Whatever spaces we are afforded the opportunity, start the conversation and continue it, because it is only in educating persons that we are able to change the situation and cause a shift to take place, because we are not having conversations with our young adults. We are not having conversations with our children. Our children are complaining that as adults, we are not listening to them. And that is a major, major issue. We tell ourselves because we are adults, we know everything. We are always right. And I want to encourage parents to listen to what your children are saying to you. Listen to what they are saying, because they may be in a situation where they are experiencing abuse. We have a lot of teen violence in teenage relationships, right? And these teenagers don't have anybody to turn to. Yeah, so I would encourage parents to listen, have conversations with your children, listen to what they are saying, and, you know, advise accordingly. If you do not know what to say to them, reach out for help. Yes, there are no, as Sulin said, there are no parenting manuals. I wish there was a parenting manual that I could very often go back to. Yeah, but we learn as we go along. We learn by trial and error, and, you know, with the help, the intervention of God, lots of prayer. I mean, we make it through. But it is single parenting is a factor that is troubling.
Wow. I want us to just, as we're about to wrap up this particular segment, a lot of what both of you all have been saying it ties to something that I'm going to throw it out and just ask for final statements on it. Sule, you represent an organization, Sule Joseph and Associates. It's a private entity.
Yes.
Onika, you represent a Woman of Substance, and again an NGO and a private entity. What are your thoughts in closing on stronger partnerships with NGOs by government to be able to get the type of resource that we need to be able to get the type of support in this fight against what we've been seeing as a growing tide? Sule, and then we're going to close with Onika on your thoughts on it very quickly.
All right. One of the things that I'm a firm believer in is returning to community parenting. I think in our haste to become more advanced and a first world type nation, we have adopted a lot of the values and functioning of some other first world nations, the US, for example, and we have moved away from some of our traditional values that served us well. And so a return to community parenting. And more than just return to community parenting, we also need to have more conversations about, as you mentioned previously, about these private organizations working in tandem more so with government organizations to provide support for families and persons who are what we call would be not victims, persons who are at risk. So persons who are at risk, there needs to be a lot more partnership with government and non-government organizations towards developing programs for that specific purpose. You see, when I spoke particularly about parents and parents not being, having the specific skills necessary to parent their children, a lot of parents are and have been very dependent on school and the school environment to parent their children, to teach them the values, to impart knowledge and information and so on. We need to have a return to that. I've been calling as well for a return to teaching of values within the school system. It's not enough for us to just teach ABCs and reading and writing and so on. We also need to inculcate a culture of a specific value that we want. We need to get that, we need to ingrain that value in our children, and so that needs to come from within the education system. So that's for me is pretty much, and the final thing is that I think we need to hold our parents accountable. Yes, I understand that parents like to make the argument, I make the child, but I didn't make the mine. And I feel as though most times, or a lot of times, that's a cop-out. I believe that yes, children are difficult, and parents should be given an avenue where when they have difficult children, they can reach out and have access to that avenue so that they can receive help to parent those children, or skills to parent those difficult children.
Thank you
and
much.
that is me in conclusion.
Very, very good information. Solid. Onika, your thoughts on partnerships?
I agree with partnership because the government cannot do it alone. NGOs cannot do it alone. We have limited resources available, and partnership, one can chase 1,000, two can put 10,000 to flight. If we come together, then we will be able to make better uses of the little resources that we have. So the government has a responsibility. We as the community, the NGOs, the NPOs, the faith-based organizations, we also have a responsibility. With partnership, we are also able to do more because, of course, the resources could be shared. I know that persons have issues, you know, with working with the government, and some may think that, you know what, if we go to the government, we may have persons not wanting to report, on persons not wanting to turn up for counseling and stuff. But if we need to sit, everybody needs to sit at the table, all the stakeholders need to sit at the table and come up with a good referral pathway so that we can know what is required. We can know exactly what we need so that we could put heads together and come up with possible solutions that we could help to end the scourge of domestic violence and abuse in our society.
Thank you very much, Onika. So there we have it, a clarion call for continued or strengthening the partnership between government and private enterprise, or NGOs, faith-based organizations and so on, in this fight against domestic violence and the rising tide of abuse. I want to thank our guests, Sule Joseph and Onika Mars, for providing clear perspective on these issues for us this evening. I really appreciate you all taking the time to be with us. And we're going to wrap up. We're going to go for a break. And when we get back, we're going to move into the next segment of our show. We're going to have the Minority Counselor on with us this evening discussing some very, very important matters. Thank you very much, Sule. Thank you very much, Onika.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to go
Patricia
to a break.
Nicholson Richards to our
Come to
top
Tobago
story.
Update Sports. I'm your boy Marcus Daniel. Thank you.
Trinidad and looms as
Question remains, when
The public is making
Nobody lives here.
oil and gas exploration continues to affect the livelihood
Speyside Marine
in
Industry.
Tobago fishermen,
When will the
Sion
Roxborough
Francis,
Hospital be fully functional?
of the 5 a.m. to 12 p.m. window
Still
at the
find
island.
treasures like the Golden
continue to
Waterfall.
rise in Tobago.
The Street 919 FM and the Tobago Updates presents the Tobago Updates Morning Show live simulcast on the Street 919 FM. Start your day with all the information you want and need with the simulcast of the Tobago Updates Morning Show live Mondays to Fridays from 7 a.m. on the Street 919 FM, the official station that defends the nation.
Morning, good morning, put a smile on your
And we're back this evening on the Minority Report. And with me in studio, I am joined by Minority Councillor Petal Daniel Benoit. Regular on the program, very familiar face now in the Tobago space, and constant on the Minority Report. Welcome this evening, Petal.
Thank you, Marilyn.
So I know you would have been listening to the discussion that we've been having this evening with respect to the issues and so on. And again, the second part of our program is normally geared towards bringing the public into an awareness of what actually takes place in the House and some of those things that both you and the minority leader, Assemblyman Kelvin Morris, bring to the forefront with respect to advocacy and with respect to holding the administration accountable. And we want to just take a look this evening at the last motion that you would have brought in the House with respect to addressing some strengthening of the partnerships and so on, to address and to deal with some of the very issues that we would have heard spoken to in the first segment of the program. So as we begin the discussion, before we actually get into it, I want to play for the benefit of the viewing audience and our listeners that motion as presented by you in the House. I'll ask the producer to run that clip.
And whereas the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996 via the 5th schedule is responsible for all matters related to social welfare. And whereas the onset of COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 resulted in stay-at-home measures, and whereas there has been an alarming increase in incidents of domestic violence and child abuse directly affecting men, women, and children, be it resolved that this House joins in condemnation of these heinous acts of violence and abuse meted out to citizens throughout the country. And be it further resolved that this House mandates the Tobago House of Assembly to develop and implement strategies to treat with the meaningful engagement of both victims and perpetrators of these incidents.
Wow. And for those listening in, that was the motion moved by the minority councillor in the 6th sitting. So, Petal, share a bit with us in terms of that particular motion. You know, how you felt. You seem to be passionate about it.
Thank you, Marilyn. Well, in relation to that particular motion, if you recall, weeks before, maybe a week or so before the motion, there was an upsurge in crime and violence against women, men, and children. I think there was 1 week where there were 2 domestic violence, one against mother and child, where the victim was mother and child and both died as a result of domestic violence. There was another instance where there was a murder-suicide where the perpetrator as well as the victim, he killed his common law and killed himself in the presence of their daughter. And we just saw an increase in domestic violence and child abuse. And as a minority, we felt that we need to do something. We are not in government, but we can advocate on behalf of these victims. We also took the opportunity to speak to our stakeholders in the sector, and of course they would have brought some information, enlightened us, that really triggered and motivated us and made us feel that, you know, this is the right motion, this is the right call for this time, and as a minority we need to have our voices heard in this clarion call to reduce the incidences of domestic violence and child abuse. And what we also recognize is that we not only need to address the victims, but we also need to address the perpetrators. Hence, in the motion, we ask for resolution or solutions dealing with or addressing not only the victims, but the perpetrators. Because there's an old saying, an adage which says, hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
And sometimes the perpetrators themselves may have been past victims of domestic violence and abuse. So we felt that it has to be a holistic view in dealing with these matters, and the minority saw it as important at this particular time to bring this motion.
Again, the minority seems to really be on the pulse of things with respect to treating with issues and pertinent issues that we see affecting the children, the men, the women, or general society. What I want us to look at, however, is with a motion as serious as this, and as you would have explained, we would have seen an upsurge in crime and abuse over that period. And yet still, with a motion as serious as this, I want us to look at what were some of the responses, and this is for the benefit of the viewing public, the responses that came from the relevant parties within the administration in response to the minority bringing this report. I'll ask the producer to run the first clip.
Let me tell this House this afternoon that this motion is late, is very late.
And that is our first clip. We see the Assistant Secretary, Assemblyman Sonny Craig, and he's saying this motion is late, very late. What did you feel when you heard this particular response?
I felt that he did not understand the genesis of the motion, and for me, I felt like I took pains to do the research, to bring the information, present the information in such a way that it is understood by all. And the genesis of the motion is not that domestic violence doesn't exist or that child abuse does not exist. What we are saying, as a result of the pandemic, it has exacerbated the number of cases, and Ms. Mars, Woman of Substance, would have alluded to the fact, and she actually gave some statistics in terms of the number of persons increase in cases from 2019, 2020, and for this short Q1 in 2021. And we would, from the reports, we are seeing that the cases are more than half of previous years. And it is not only a matter locally, but it's a global matter, to the extent that the United Nations has dubbed this a shadow pandemic because of the rise and the increases. And they would have gone on under the UN Women to develop a report, and this is in consultation with over 13 countries. They would have collected this information throughout all the regions of the world, and the report was named Measuring the Shadow Pandemic, Violence Against Women During COVID-19. And in all instances, the report shows where the advent of COVID-19 pandemic and the measures to reduce the spread of the virus would have accelerated the number of cases of domestic violence. And that was our issue, that we cannot continue as normal. There has been a significant rise, and we need to treat with that significant. Yes, we understand that there are programs, there are grants, there are avenues to address, but we feel that this needs to be accelerated with the significant increase and rise in these cases of domestic violence and child abuse.
Well, let's move on to his next response to some of what you would have just explained. Mr. Producer?
Where some negligence on the part of those that were before us could be part of the reason for some of these challenges we have in our society. You see, the research on domestic violence would show that most of the perpetrators in domestic violence happen to be men. And when your island suffers a certain kind of leadership, it could filter down right into the society and create a certain measure of frustration.
Now, before we play another clip from him, I am struggling to understand exactly what was the point here. So you were there, you helped me, and help our viewers this evening.
I actually, both the minority leader and I were struggling to see some of the points. And again, I want to reiterate, I feel that the motion, as it was delivered, the point of the motion may have been missed. And
clearly,
if you recognize, and there are a lot of commentators on this particular issue in terms of increase in violence as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. And we would have heard it this evening from our two presenters. And they would have identified some factors that would have resulted in an increase in violence.
But he said he did the research.
It is, well, I am not sure the genesis of his research, but for me, in reviewing and in preparing for this motion, and we would have seen the theory backed up with persons who would deal on a daily basis with persons suffering from domestic violence. Yes, so what we are saying is that there are factors. So the fact that you had to be isolated from family and friends, been in this one setting, sometimes with your abuser, would have resulted in an increase. Another factor was as a result of you're unable to work, you're unable to be gainfully employed, you had to be retrenched, or sometimes if you were working, your pay may have been reduced because the number of hours and days that you're required to work had to be reduced. So those were some of the factors, and the frustration as well, dealing with the pandemic itself, not knowing whether or not you would catch it, not knowing the impact and the effect. So those were some of the factors that, in our view, and in a lot of commentators' view, were responsible for the increase in domestic violence as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, let's hear again a final response from the Assistant Secretary before we go into what his secretary would have said in the sitting as well. Mr. Producer?
The motion as presented to us today borders on pretense that nothing is in place. Because if I read it again, it would say, the House mandates the THA, Tobago House of Assembly, to develop and implement strategies. There is something developed already, and there are already strategies in place. And that, as an institution, the Tobago House of Assembly, we stand ready to just improve on what we already have in place, to work for the betterment.
Right, so we hear the Assistant Secretary here making it clear that there are things in place that this administration, they've already gotten ahead of it, because he began by saying that this motion is late. So he said here that they have already gotten ahead of it. There are things in place, there are things they put in motion, and so on. I want to go right into some of the responses from his secretary. Mr. Producer, you could run the clip for us, please.
I must admit that when I saw this motion, I thought that it was a decent attempt by the minority to right some of the wrongs that have been plaguing our system. and by system I mean the official system, since we're talking about the Tobago House of Assembly, over the last couple decades. The processes and because the policies and because all of those things that are necessary to make it work are not in place. And the reality is that the group of individuals who had the responsibility to put them in place is the same organization that the Minority Council belongs to.
So Petal, I want you to bring some clarity, because I am clearly confused, and I'm sure many of us listening and looking on are as well. We just heard the Assistant Secretary say that everything has been put in place. The minority was late with this motion, things are already in place, strategies. Now we're hearing the Secretary saying that things aren't in place. And it seems a blame game kicking in. So tell us what took place here.
So again, Marilyn, I think the point was missed. So I just want to read a couple excerpts for you from the UN Women's Report. And it says, the pandemic has increased, and this is verbatim, the pandemic has increased women's experiences of violence and eroded their feelings of safety. So across the 13 countries surveyed, and this is prior to COVID, 2 in 3 women report that they or a woman they know experienced violence at some point in time. However, nearly 1 in 2, or 45%, reported that they directly or indirectly experienced violence since the start of the pandemic.
Wow.
So what we are saying is that this is not business as usual. The former administration would have adopted some of the social services from the ministry, and those were implemented in the Division of Health. So we have the rental assistance, we have grants, we have a number of facilities that are available to persons in need. But what we are saying is that we need to, at this time, review those things. So let's say, for instance, the food card. There's a food card facility of $500. We recognize that within the pandemic period, inflation, the prices of goods and services has increased significantly. Sometimes you go to the supermarket from one week to the other, the prices soar. So it means now, therefore, that the time value of money may need to be reviewed. $500 may not be sufficient. And what we are saying is that, yes, the policies exist, but we think now is the time that they need to be reviewed, they need to be updated, they need to be revamped based on our current circumstance and based on our current situation. And this is in one instance with the upsurge and the significant increase. This is a time where we need to review our policies and determine, are they still relevant? Can they still work in this particular time? Do we need to review them? Do we need to implement new policies to address the issues that we currently face? And this is what we are saying.
Well, clearly, we see the administration, or those who represent the arm of the administration vested with the responsibility to address this, they seem to be missing that point and going further to politicize the issue. And we're going to close the clip section off with one more clip where we have some responses, and then Minority Councillor, you're going to share some thoughts on it. Mr. Producer.
We really have just been here for under 6 months. We need to remind the Tobagonians that the system that we have met has been the system in place for the last 21 years. So we need to be realistic. It's kind of very annoying to have the Minority Council come here today and talk about the fact that the social workers and the therapeutic counselors and so forth, that they are not doing enough when they have been trying. And it is your colleagues who did not give them the support to do what they needed to do. I join my colleague, Assemblyman Sonny Craig, in saying the motion is late.
A number of what seems to be misrepresentation. We saw Sonny beginning by saying that the motion is late. Then he said everything is in place already. This administration has already put things in place. Then we saw the secretary coming to say that things are not in place because they've only been here 6 months. And now in the final clip we are seeing a sense of antagonism, antagonistic behavior towards the previous administration, indicating that it was their responsibility. And tell us again your thoughts on this as we try to make some sense out of what they have been saying in the wake of what you and the minority leader meaningfully presented in the House.
And Marilyn, we understand, and since this new administration came into office, the issue of we have been there 21 years, what have we done? If you look around Tobago, it is obvious what the People's National Movement would have done.
Case closed.
And sometimes because we would have governed so well, and we are not saying that the People's National Movement administration has not made mistakes. We are all human. So we would have made mistakes, but we would have worked in the best interest. We would have worked for the development of the island to the extent that some things now we take for granted were not there prior to 2001 when the PNM took office. And because there were policies that were there for a long time, we have a new situation, we have a new circumstances arising. There is a need. It's just reiterating the point that there is a need for a review. And now is the right time for that review. We are still in the COVID-19 pandemic, notwithstanding we are at the endemic stage. But we have to consider moving what are the solutions coming out of, what are the new protocols, what are the new policies as we enter or we exit the COVID-19 pandemic. So it cannot be business as usual. And what I have not heard is what are their policies? What is their vision? What do you intend to do in this crisis, for want of a better word, that we have faced, in this challenge that we have faced ourselves in? And the thing about it, as a responsible minority, we don't only highlight the issues, we also put forward recommendations, and I continue to say it. So in the motion, we would have highlighted some recommendations, and again, one was reviewing the policy, and in consulting with the stakeholders, we would have identified some things that could be done to bring some resolution to this. And we are asking for the Executive Council and the PDP-led Tobago House of Assembly to give these recommendations some consideration. We cannot continue as we are. So, Ms. Mars would have indicated that greater partnership is needed.
Yeah.
We can't do it alone. The government can't do it alone, neither can the NGOs. There has been an increase for the resources of the state in this regard. We have seen where persons, and the NGO would have indicated, where persons are coming for additional resources because we are seeing an increase in the cases. If there's an increase in cases, then it means that we need increase in resources. To me, that is just automatic.
Yeah.
So we really need to look at the issues, stop politicizing and stop personalizing. Because we have recognized that when an issue is raised, instead of meaningfully look at the issue, the messenger or the person, and in this case the minority raising the issue, are attacked personally. And what we are asking for is to deal with the issue. Is there a challenge with increase in domestic violence and child abuse?
Yes.
The research says that there is.
Yes.
What are we going to do about it? And to me, that's the bottom line.
Wow, very well said. And again, you're listening to the Minority Report. In studio with me, Minority Councillor Mrs. Petal Danielle Benoit, really bringing some perspective to the conversation. And as we would have seen with the clips and so on, the minority is calling on the administration to not look at the messenger, but to look at the reality of the issues. And in fact, there is an increase, as we would have heard from our prior conversations, that can be directly tied. And so the motion brought would be to strengthen the relationships between the state and NGOs and so on.
Strengthen the partnerships, increase the advocacy, increase the awareness, increase, and we need to strengthen these things.
True, true.
So just imagine this situation existed prior to the pandemic. We are going through this phase and we are seeing the numbers, the statistics, the reports are showing that it has been exaggerated. In some instances, twofold.
Yeah.
Should the response be the same? What if the response was the same to address COVID-19 pandemic? We may have all been dead by now.
So true, eh? So true.
So we have to be situational in an approach, and we are saying that this is an urgent situation that need an urgent intervention.
Thank you very, very much, Minority Councillor Petal Danielle Benoit, again bringing a lot of passion to the discussion and to this topic. And as we close this segment of the program, we really want to reiterate that motion that would have been brought by the Minority Councillor to strengthen the relationships and utilize the skill sets of the NGOs and the FBOs and so on, and a call for this administration to treat with this issue from a situational standpoint. I want to thank Minority Councillor for being with us this evening, and again, very informative, valuable information. So I want to give you the opportunity for closing remarks before we end the program this evening.
Again, I am really delighted to be here this evening to share the information, and I'm happy with the information that was shared earlier in terms of the perspective from the persons directly involved dealing with both victims and perpetrators. And I just want to encourage, Tobago is our island. We are Tobagonians first, and whatever side of the political divide that we sit on, we all want, and I think we all want what is good and what is in the best interest of Tobago. And the minority is willing to work with the Executive Council and the current PDP-led Tobago House of Assembly in arriving at solutions, sustainable solutions to address the issues and the challenges that we do face. And again, the minority will continue to provide advocacy on behalf of the people.
Thank you very much. You're viewing Minority Report, and before we close, I want to say good evening to the Minority Leader, Assemblyman Kelvon Morris, who is logged on and he's listening. He's locked on. Yes, you were missed from set today, you know, and I really want to thank you, viewers, thank Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago and the region for supporting this program. Stay logged on, and as we leave this evening, I want to encourage you. Our next session is next Tuesday, and you want to tell somebody, tell a friend, get into that sharing mode, because the issues that are ventilated in this particular program, the Minority Report, definitely will be in the best interest of Tobago. My name is Marilyn David. Thank you for viewing, and have a good evening.